Hi, and welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Today, John joins us on the show to teach us about some of his life experiences. He's adventured out into the wild of the Colorado River. He's done musical ventures, and he's here today to show you what he's accomplished in his adventures and time here on Earth so far. So I hope you join us today in discussion that we have around such topics. Thanks again, and we really do hope you enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the World Networking Podcast. Today we have John joining us, and he will be having a discussion with me about the various elements that he's been through in his career and his life experience. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Cameron. Hi, good morning, and thanks for having me, and greetings to the listeners.
Absolutely. I can't wait to dive into some of the subjects we're going to dive into with your past. I think, the first point you sent me here, lucky to be here. A good sense of positivity I read from you. How do you stay positive with some of the stuff that you've been through in life?
Priorities. Everything is priorities, and I guess not taking yourself too seriously. You try to gather ideas and thoughts from the people around you and draw off their energy. It's helpful to have some goals and some direction to where you'd like to go with your life, and when you take incremental steps toward that, it's a positive feeling when you actually can accomplish something.
Sure. Yeah, I think motivating positive discipline, having traits where you learn how to connect with yourself, with your innermost emotions, and coordinating that in an effective manner. It's something that it's not direct in discovering.
You never start out that way. You start out just trying to figure things out, and in my life, I landed in a small town by my parents and an older sister who were coming out of the Second World War, and they had experiences that were unlike anything that any of us that are alive now would have experienced. My parents were born in the early 20s, so that was over 100 years ago, and the hardships that they had were extreme compared to most of what we've experienced now. And here I come plopping into the world, into their lives, and I was real lucky not to be born 20 years earlier. Because that was a real rough time in this country, and certainly for them. So, I got a good start, and nobody has any control over where they're born or to whom they're born. So, you look out with your genes and your placement, and you go from there.
Sure, yeah. There's a lot to uncover there with how scenarios line up. Society has always ventured through a lot of turmoil and hardship, unfortunately, over many years, where there's just unruly amounts of negatives and positives, both that develop through these events. But the people that lived through those times, it's truly monumental, learning how they decided, their course of action would handle and would lay out to be in those kinds of times. I know some of the World War II stories I've heard personally, like one person I know from my hometown, her grandmother was part of the French resistance, and she ended up going through 13 factories or something like that. Labor camps, different. Like she was trying to prevent herself from getting to the labor camps, and she had to do all sorts of things to sneak and embezzle her way back to France from those factories. And it's just a crazy story of monumental courage. You know, I mean, at a point she stood in the middle of the road telling this German crew to just give her a ride. She was tired of walking, you know, and I couldn't imagine how gutsy you'd have to be to really, after a war with so much devastation, to stand in the middle of the road and be like, look, I'm done.
Take a risk.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in my case, you know, and there's, you know, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of stories, but I'm lucky to be here because, you know, my father, having an honest assessment of your skills and where you're going with life really is healthy. And in my case, I had some people around me, some relatives around me and some friends around me that were always good at pointing out both my faults and occasionally my strong points. And, you know, that leads to developing up a character. I joined the Boy Scouts as a brand new Cub Scout. They called it Bobcat in those days, which was the entry rank of scouting. And that gave me a chance to find out a lot about life and basic skills, and it led to a progression of ranks. But it was more than that. It was saying, okay, I have a long-term goal. Maybe I want to go all the way through this program, but the first step is I have to do these tasks in order to get to the first step. And then when you get there, you see the next set of tasks and you do those. And ultimately, you get all the way through that program. And then there was a transition to Boy Scouts. And the transition led to setting up more goals and more skills and the developing of more comfort with both the people the kids that I was working with and growing with, as well as the leaders that were helping us. Eventually, my goal was to become an Eagle Scout, and there was a clear way to do that. And if you did those things one step at a time, you got there. And so I was fortunate enough to do that, and so were a lot of other people. And while I'm proud of what I was able to achieve, I also clearly understand that I didn't get there without a lot of leaders and mentors and people that I can name that helped along the way. I now know how to tie a bowline in a square knot and all the other things that have served me well through life. Along that way, I also learned how to be part of a team and to be a leader on a team. So good life skills, but one step at a time.
Yeah, that's a lot to learn, you know, and knots. I don't know how many people following the show have tangled with knots, so to speak, much, but yeah, it's quite the tangle. Yeah. I have learned that plenty of times going fishing. I had to make a laminated book at a point. You know, I got so sick of it.
But, you know, you pick up these little things, and if you hang on to them, you know, whether it's, reading, writing, math, science, knot tying, learning to get along with your fellow people, all of those skills are, you know, they're learned one at a time, and you build on them, and you know, you make mistakes, and you say, well, I'm not going to do that again. That was a bad choice, and hopefully it doesn't. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, and hopefully that knot's untieable. Well, that's great. No, that's. I'm glad that you brought that up. That was something I wanted to get into, and you know, on that line, are there any other fun facts about yourself?
Fun facts. I
just something out of the ordinary.
I'll give you three, Cameron, and you could choose which one, if any, that you want to elaborate on. I once rode a DeLorean through the back lots of Disneyland. I once had a black bear that was tranquilized wake up in the back of the station wagon, probably foot behind my head. And I once shared an office with 1,000 antique milk bottles.
Oh, I got to hear about the milk bottles. As crazy as all those other two are, the milk bottles, huh?
Yeah. There was a time when I was head of the state's historic collections. We had a warehouse in Sacramento, and this was at the time when we had just finished building the State Railroad Museum in Sacramento, Old Sacramento, and I had just completed work on the state capitol during the restoration, and then I was the director of the State Capitol Museum for a while. And when I left that job, I went to Old Sacramento to this warehouse where acres of antiques, furniture, paintings, Indian baskets, native art, all kinds of stuff was being stored and collected with a likelihood that it would be used in displays in various parks and museums around the state. And at the time, they were collecting milk bottles and milk related paraphernalia, memorabilia, for intended use in a dairy museum somewhere in the state. So we had over 1,000 milk bottles in the collection in Sacramento, and it was next to the office where I was working. To this day, we've never done a dairy museum. We have, however, done a state Indian museum and a state citrus museum. So that's the story of the milk bottles.
Huh. Yeah, I would have never guessed. I didn't know that you worked on any projects like that too, or around that. That's very interesting. Great fun fact. Something I wanted to get into is you kind of touched on a little bit of your story with education experience there, but did you end up going to college anywhere?
I did. When I was in sixth grade, by that time I had, had a lot of scouting trips, backpacking trips, camping trips, and also with my family, we like to camp. And I developed a great interest and love of parks and outdoor settings. And by the time I was in the sixth grade, I thought, I think I'd really like to be a ranger. A forest ranger or a park ranger. I don't know that I had a real clear sense of what the goal exactly was, but I knew it was something in that sense. And so I set my sights on that. And by the time I got through high school, and with more camping and backpacking and travel and what's not, I decided that I wanted to be a park ranger. And the only school at the time that had offered a degree in park management was in Sacramento. At the time, it was called Sacramento State College. It's now California State University, Sacramento. And they had a program that was developed by a national park ranger and a state park person. And it was a small department, but they offered a degree in park management. And that's where I went. And 4 years later, graduated with a degree in environmental resources, park management, right at the time when the state of California was offering tests for park rangers. And I took the test and did well enough to land a job as a park ranger. Started seasonally in the mountains at Plumas Eureka State Park, someplace that you should know, Cameron. And went from there to Folsom Lake and began a 35-year career with state parks.
What's your favorite lake to visit?
My favorite lake? Ooh, well, lots of lakes in the state.
Oh yeah.
Maybe say Lake Tenaya. I spent a year in Yosemite working for the National Park Service, and had some time in the backcountry there. But yeah, many lakes in the state, and they're all great.
Yeah, truly. No, I definitely enjoy some of the lakes in Plymouth County for the tranquility they bring. That's something I always valued. Silver Lake was my favorite for that reason. It's kind of high up there, and it's a very, very fun thing to do is check out the geography and geology of those areas every time, you know.
Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the Lakes Basin area. That's another great place. So spend a lot of time in there too. Yeah.
I think Clear Lake's also the other one that I enjoy. It just seems like, especially when you're coming the backside towards Northern California from the Sonoma area, there's that whole pass over that mountain. It feels like you're going into Jurassic Park every time. I swear. That's a scary road, but it's a very beautiful one at the same time. But I digress. I just wanted to kind of see and get a feel for what sense of adventure you have.
I took a 3-week trip with two buddies. We hiked the John Muir Trail from Yosemite down to Mount Whitney, and that's a trail that's iconic, and everybody should do it if they can. And there's fine scenery and lakes, and a real challenge. And there's another opportunity to set a goal and work toward achieving it. It'll kick your butt, but it's well worth it. So, and Cameron, I have to say I did that when I was 65 years old.
Wow, you destroyed the John Muir Trail. I can't believe that. I mean, that's a ballsy move. There's a lot of people your age that wouldn't even consider.
Listen, I was a youngster compared to some of the guys we met out there. We camped one night next to a father-son team, and the father was close to 80, and he hiked in 3 or 4 days to get to where we were. So, yeah, there's a lot of strong dudes on that trail.
Yeah, it goes to show keeping physical prowess is important, and there's no reason age should be always a factor to hold you down. There's mind over matter.
Truly. Well, we talked before about consequences and decisions that are made, and decisions you make in your own life have consequences. And I grew up at a time when the drug culture was just beginning in California, and that easily could sidetrack a person. I chose to not do that because I could see some of the consequences of it, and that would have really sidetracked the goals that I had set for myself. And so by not engaging in some practices that have adverse consequences, it allowed me to stay healthy and to continue to hike, to backpack, to fish, to do the outdoor things that I enjoy doing. And to this day, to still, I was out this morning and I got it's not quite 5 miles yet. It's 4.85 miles that I've got on my Fitbit right now. But I'll finish 5 miles, which is my goal for the day. And that's what allowed me to do the John Muir and the sections of the Pacific Crest Trail even after that, and to go down the Colorado River in a dory at age 70.
How neat, man! The Colorado River must have been a blast.
Oh, it was a tremendous experience. It's something I wanted to do. I did some training at the Grand Canyon early in my park career. I've had a real soft spot for the canyon ever since, and to be able to actually get on the river and spend 3 weeks floating from one end to the other. It was truly a joy. It was a real life goal for me.
Now I have a question about kind of, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm just curious your take on alcohol and your journey with it. If you had any negatives or because I know the military with military life in general, there's a lot of connotation with alcohol, of course. With a lot of that side of things, it's understandable, of course, but I just didn't know if you had a dynamic for people that were maybe looking at the military life. Because I know personally some people I've talked to in the past that, they had to step away from it because of that kind of mentality some people in their groups had. They just couldn't handle being in such a pressing environment.
Well, I spent time in the military, and we can get into that if you want. But you asked about alcohol specifically, and alcohol is like many other things in life in moderation. And it's not bad for you. Into excess, it can do you harm and eventually kill you. If not directly, certainly indirectly through the effects it has on your body. So, they say that, a little red wine is good for the heart. I don't know that there's a whole lot of value in a lot of beer, but, I know it's very refreshing after a hard day's work or a hard day's hike to have a cold one. Again, that's not going to kill you or do much damage, but if you're smart enough to know your limits, then it will go well with you. And, if you're not smart enough or you don't exercise the right amount of discipline over it, it can get the best of you. And, I've seen a lot of people that have gone real south when they don't have the proper amount of respect for what alcohol of any kind can do to you.
Yeah. I lost a family member back in the early or late 2000s from alcohol, just for that sheer fact, they can't find pace, can't find balance. It happens in a lot of cases.
The worst thing you can do is have a little too much and then get in an automobile, because then not only are you putting yourself at risk, but the other people on the road. And I, in my park career, there have been times when I've had to clean up those messes that other people have caused, and both in vehicles and in boats. There was a time when I was working in reservoirs, and we'd have to go explain to a family member that their family member didn't make it because alcohol was a factor in decisions they made on the water, and it resulted in their demise. Not fun.
No. And that's the reason I didn't even know your involvement with alcohol on that level. And yeah, I'm sorry you had to witness some of that stuff. I mean, there's unfortunately a lot of service personnel that do that daily. It's something we have to really give respect to. That's not ideal. And unfortunately, that's one of those things in society you can't really control. There's always going to be a factor of people want to be uncontrollable. And yeah, we see that in a lot of cases: gambling, drug abuse. Yeah, there's a quantity of discussions to be had there, but it's no less tragic. And I definitely applaud you for helping with those cases too. I mean, that's not just everyone could do that, and that's a very honorable thing, even though it's not ideal. Again,
it's a tougher part of the job. There are more pleasant parts of the job. Yeah,
surely. Backpedaling to the military, Is that something you wanted to?
Well, I can tell you the sort of, my story, which is probably similar to many, many stories. I came of age during the Vietnam War. And if you recall from your case history, we had a draft and there was a lottery to decide who was going to be drafted into the military to fight in Vietnam. And the year that my birth date required that I be in the lottery, guys that had low lottery numbers, they knew where they were going, and they were able to make their plans, and they figured that they were either going to be drafted or they had to go join a service branch. The guys with high numbers were not probably going to get called. I was right in the middle. My number was 124, and that year they went to 125. So if I hadn't made a decision on my own, I would have been drafted. I had actually taken the test for the Coast Guard, and I scored pretty well on the test. I think I scored a 96, but they weren't taking anybody that didn't score at 98 or above. So that was not to be. But Cameron, as you and I both had some experience with music, I had by that time had a few years of piano because my mother was a piano teacher, and then started playing percussion in junior high, and then in high school, and then in college. And by the time I got done with college, I could handle myself pretty well with music, and so found out that there was a Army band in the National Guard in Sacramento, where I was living. And I went down and auditioned and was accepted into the 59th Army Band, and joined the California National Guard, and spent the next 35 years working with the National Guard in one form or another. I ended up having to leave the band when I moved to my next park assignment. And I did a variety of jobs in the National Guard, but then came back to the band later in my career, and over the course of that time progressed from just an absolute buck private through the ranks, and eventually became the first sergeant of the band and the enlisted band leader for the Army band. And if it hadn't been for my mother teaching me piano and deciding to join the junior high band in 7th grade, I would probably be either a Vietnam casualty or maybe a walking wounded from the Vietnam conflict. But again, the choices you make and the consequences that come of that, it turned out well for me, and I'm grateful for that, and for all the people that taught me along the way and accepted me into during the audition and into the ranks.
That's quite the story, I have to admit. Being the lead, you were conducting, were you not?
I didn't do much conducting because there were others that had better skills at that. But in terms of planning and directing a lot of the training and the weekend activities that we had to do, the drills and the performances, I was involved in most of that.
That's awesome. Oh, it's just a really, really cool experience to have, I'm sure.
And we took some great trips too. The fun fact on the DeLorean story, that was on a band tour that we took to Southern California, and we played at Disneyland, and
kidding.
We played on a stage somewhere on the other side of the park, and we got all done, and we're wrapping things up, and we're back getting ready to load the bus and the trucks with all of our equipment. And I was taking inventory, realized that we were missing a gong. gong that we had used as part of the concert, and
it was gong. It was just gong.
Was gone. That's right. So the guy that was the liaison from Disneyland said, "Well, come on, we'll go back over to the concert site and see if it's there." Hop in my car, and we went back. There's a whole back lot in Disneyland. There's a whole backstage that you don't see. And so we go through this little door, and we're in the back lot of Disneyland, and his car is the DeLorean. And so we're zipping around through the back lots of Disneyland over to the concert. And sure enough, there was the gong, and we brought it back. So I've seen the backside of Disneyland, and it's just like a movie or a stage set that you'd see, where the front's all nice and pretty and pristine, and the back has got duct tape and styrofoam and all kinds of stuff. So.
Man, don't get the Disney police on me, all right? We gotta keep it low. It's magic. It's magic duct tape. All right.
That's right.
That's awesome. I really think that counts for a once in a lifetime story right there, though. Especially, the missing gong. How many people come to Disneyland with that problem?
No.
Oh, that's great. Something I wanted to get back into is there something with the National Guard that you learned going in that you weren't necessarily prepared for? A challenge you had to overcome with discipline or just timing?
For me personally, or for the units I was involved in? Maybe both. I think one of the things the military does for you, it's a great melting pot, and I grew up in rural Sonoma County, which was mostly white, middle class or lower middle class. True, we had a few sprinklings of kids in my class that were people of color, but they were just other kids. I mean, I didn't think anything about that they were any different. But once you go into the military, and especially when you go through basic training, you see people that are from all walks of life, all social economic levels, all racial backgrounds, all cultural backgrounds, and you really find yourself crossing many other cultures and thought patterns that you may be unfamiliar with, and so it was a real learning experience for me, and how to deal with that, how to both accept that and get along with that. I learned a whole new vocabulary that I had not been exposed to before. I would like to think that they learned a few things from me too. We had people from many other parts of the country, and particularly from the Deep South, that our ways on the West Coast were foreign to them. And one of the things that was kind of funny and was not in any way related to socioeconomic or cultural or racial was just the geography of the United States. Kids that our fellow soldiers that were there from the East Coast could not get their heads around the size of the state of California. When you talk in terms of driving 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours and still being in the state, still being in the state, I mean, you're crossing 5 or 6 states in the East to accomplish the same thing. So
it's completely different for people over there.
It absolutely is, and so that's one of the ways that I grew, was in just learning about other parts of the world and other ways of thinking.
Now, where was your favorite state to visit when you had the chance?
Well,
and it can't be California. I know that's a trick question.
over the years, I've visited a lot. We take a lot of road trips, my family and then my wife and I. And I have a daughter that lives in Seattle and a son that has lived in North Carolina and New Mexico and is now living in Massachusetts. And so we pretty well cross the country, both north, south, and east, west. But if I had to pick one favorite state other than California, I think it would be the state of Arizona. And if nothing else, because of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. Yeah. You like that side of the Grand Canyon versus Utah side, huh? Or are you more familiar with Arizona's side?
For the very first time, I visited the North Rim this last summer. I've been on the South Rim many times and spent much time both in the canyon and on the South Rim. But the first time I've been on the North Rim, and that's a truly special and very different place. But no, you're right. Arizona, Utah, the southern part of Utah is gorgeous. It's stark. It's it doesn't have any forests, but it's got a beauty that is quite unique. But no, you asked a question. What's my favorite state other than California? And I got to say it's the variety and the beauty of Arizona from its north to its south.
It's not a bad choice. It's really not a bad choice, especially around Flagstaff and such beautiful areas like that. Completely foreign from what a lot of people would view Arizona like. It's more than saguaro cactus. It's much more. Yeah. It has diversity. It has water in season, and it's one of my favorite places to drive through. I've only been a handful of times, of course. But every time I've personally driven through, going to the rock shops and the different native establishments there, it's really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, Route 66 on the Mother Road. That's an iconic old highway for getting from Chicago to L.A. and California. Our son and his wife graduated from Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. Great school. Arizona has a bunch of great schools. But you can think of Phoenix and Tucson and the kind of the desert and the heat. Flagstaff's at 5,000 feet. It's full of ponderosa pine.
Oh yeah. It's amazing. You just roll in there, especially in the colder months, and there's snow. Like, I didn't expect to see snow in Arizona on my trip, but it's always a pleasant surprise.
When I took my son down there to visit the campus when he was in high school and considering it as a college. And by the way, maybe at some point I can tell my son's story because it's much more interesting than mine. But we flew into Phoenix and rented a car. And fortunately, we were either alerted to it or were smart enough to rent a 4-wheel drive Jeep. Because by the time we got to Flagstaff, there was 2 feet of snow on the ground around the campus. So it gets colder.
No kidding. Yeah, that's definitely lucky you had the wheels for that at that moment. Because again, most people wouldn't dare to even consider that. And we can touch base on your son's story. I'm very fascinated to hear. I just wanted to ask you a quick question about Utah. When you spent time up there, did you go to Bryce Canyon? Absolutely.
Bryce, Zion, the Canyonlands, all great places. Bryce is one of my favorites. I love hiking around the hoodoos. Zion is great, but it's gotten so crowded. It's really hard to find a quality experience there. One of the guys that I started my park career with, ranger career with, loves Canyonlands, and he's worked there seasonally for even in retirement. So it's a lot of diversity in that part of the world. So.
Yeah, it's and especially with running some of these national parks, it's a lot of maintenance and how much terrain there is. I couldn't imagine.
let's not forget Arches. And a book that I grew up with was Edward Abbey's Desert Solitaire. That was a Bible for park rangers in his day.
What was that book name? Desert Solitaire?
Desert Solitaire. Yep.
And that's by who?
Edward Abbey. He was a nonconformist writer and park ranger, and he wrote Desert Solitaire as a park ranger at Arches National Park before it was improved, when it was still really undeveloped, and then he later went on to write many other books, but one of the ones that was quite popular at the time was called The Monkey Wrench Gang. And it was a story of, a fictional story of his attempt to undo the building of the Glen Canyon Dam that dammed up the Colorado River to make Lake Powell. He was adamantly against that environmentally, and so he conceived this plot of this gang that went about to set to destroy the dam. Interestingly, years later, I learned that in 1983, Glen Canyon Dam was almost destroyed by a severe winter and floodwaters that came out of the Rockies and down and filled Lake Powell to over the top of the dam. But fortunately, there was some active Bureau of Reclamation people that were working there at the time. They went down to Home Depot and bought a bunch of plywood and built additional flashboards above the level of the dam to keep the dam from overtopping, and the spillways were eroding, and they almost lost the dam by just the sheer force of the amount of water that was coming down there that year. And at the same time, three crazy river guides got a boat, a dory, and on the very height of the water flow on the release from Glen Canyon, they ran the Colorado River in something like 36 hours instead of the 2 or 3 weeks that it normally takes. The book is called Emerald Mile, and it's a fabulous read if you enjoy the drama of nature at its worst or best.
Truly awesome. Yeah, I typed that out. I'm gonna go ahead and paste this over so I can put these book references because they're very neat, very, very, very neat. And just so I have it, I kind of was looking and trying to paste my notes when you were mentioning the canyon story, or sorry, the dam story. But so is Desert Solitaire about that, where a group of people almost try to sabotage the dam?
No, was I hearing that right? Desert Solitaire was Edward Abbey's reflections on his work at Arches National Park.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
The Monkey Wrench Gang was his book about Glen Canyon. Okay,
that's where I knew I misheard something and I wanted to just clarify. Because the thing with that story is, and I'm going to geek out a little bit here, but I think you might find it interesting because I don't know how much you're familiar with the Fallout series. But the Fallout games, there's a Fallout New Vegas game, and there's a whole premise of Caesar's Legion being part of the enemy factions, so to speak, the evil factions, where they try to take out and control Hoover Dam. And it's like a whole element of the game. The core story is the dam is like who has the dam has the power in the apocalypse. And it was just, it's very on lines, similar to the monkey wrench you mentioned. With that, it makes me think maybe they got a little bit of inspiration from that. book, actually.
Could very well be. One dam is just up the road from the other one.
Yeah, no kidding. And I find that stuff very fascinating, the way stories are told. It's very, very, very unique with some of the terrain we have on the West, especially. There's some drastic changes weather and such can cause. I mean, talk to anyone in southern Nevada and in Arizona, New Mexico area about the monsoon season, and they'll tell you what water looks like.
That's right. They see a lot of it, but it's very concentrated times.
Yeah. When it pours, it pours, but when it's dry, it's dry. I mean, the place where Billy the Kid is buried is an area I learned a little bit about traveling there. I didn't realize that their water was poisoned or contaminated. In that whole area, they had to pump or retrieve water for the longest time outside of that area to that fort, and that was kind of one of the things that made it interesting, that fort flooded one time. And like, who would have guessed that in a place so detrimental on water and resource that you'd have flooding like that coming through it. But it's a very interesting environment in North America.
It is indeed. Yeah.
All over the world.
Let me tell you my son's story, because I think that might be instructive for somebody who might find himself or herself in a similar situation. I spent 10 years as a park superintendent in the Central Valley, California, northern San Joaquin, and we lived in the little town of Gustine, which is 4,000 people, and the high school, the graduating class was something less than 50. And so small town, and our daughter graduated from high school there, and our son went to high school there, and he really wasn't all that motivated as a student, and he took just enough to get by. And he got out of, or we moved actually for his senior year, moved up to the Redwoods, up to Northern California, where I was working up there as a park superintendent. And so he finished his senior year in the Redwoods. And when he got done, he was, he enjoyed playing his guitar, and, he didn't have much ambition. His real goal in life was to take the Greyhound bus to San Francisco, maybe form a band and just kind of hang out. And we said, you've got more talent than that, and we think probably you could probably do well by trying to see if you could develop your music in some way. And we'd heard about, through one of his guitar magazines, we heard about a music school in Hollywood. And so we went down to check it out, and he thought, that looked pretty good, and he'd like to go there. So he went to Musicians Institute. And he said at the time, I don't want to go to college. There's nothing that anybody can teach me that I want to learn. So instead, he went to music school in Hollywood and lived on his own in an apartment. And he learned a lot of music, but he learned a lot about life. He learned how to take care of himself, how to cook for himself, how to pay his own bills, because, we were 600-700 miles away. And he walked back and forth to classes because they didn't have a car or any other means of transportation. And he was around music people 24/7. And after about a year there, we'd come down and visit him. And remember, he grew up in Northern and Central California. And he said, when we'd come to visit him, he said, take me anywhere that's green. He just longed for something that wasn't quite so urban. And so we go visit Griffith Park, or one of the parks around there. And after a year and a half in Hollywood, he decided that he didn't want to do music full time, that kind of a life was not something that he was interested in. So he moved back close to where he had grown up in Central Valley, and he was going to form a band and kind of kick around. But we kind of thought maybe he ought to take at least a class or two at the junior college. So he decided he'd enroll in the junior college, and he took a couple of classes, and then he said, well, as long as I'm taking some classes, maybe I'll take a full load. And he was taking kind of the bonehead classes because he hadn't taken any advanced classes in high school. So to take anything at all, he kind of had to start at the beginning. And one day he called up and he said, I'm taking all these classes and everything. He says, what does it take to get a doctorate? Well, we didn't know at the time, but he had taken an astronomy class, and that lit his fire. He got so interested in astronomy and found out that he had an aptitude for math and science. And eventually he did well in his classes. And he was in a chemistry class, and he suddenly realized that his lab partner was kind of interesting, and she turned out to eventually be his wife. And they moved on to Northern Arizona University, where they got 5 undergraduate degrees between them. He got a degree in chemistry, astronomy, and physics. And he went on from there to North Carolina, to Wake Forest, and got a doctorate in physics. And he's now writing programs, writing code for a company that takes on clients and solves massive physics problems for the tech industry, for the government, for the military, for all kinds of people. So, it doesn't take much to get you motivated, but once you set a goal and you get yourself motivated, you can accomplish amazing things. And I'm really proud of him for eventually sticking with it. But it was a struggle for him at the start.
Yeah, that level of commitment is nothing to stick at. It's a very long process to go through that, and man, that's quite the story, actually. I'm glad you shared that, and that's hopeful for people maybe going through their education, kind of wondering if it's worth it, and if it's something that they can derive passion through. I think a lot of people struggle to find that send all thing that they enjoy.
And I used to sit on the school board, and we were always trying to balance the academic side with the technical trades side. And certainly in California, and I think it's true nationwide, we have really emphasized go to college and get a 4-year or more degree, and de-emphasized getting a skill, going to trade school, going through an apprenticeship. And we shouldn't be doing that, because there is absolute value in finding whatever your passion is and whatever your skill set is and maximizing that. And not everybody needs to go to college, because we don't need a college degree to do tech support. We don't need a college degree to fix the plumbing or the electrical in your house. But we sure need those people to call on when the toilet backs up. That's just as honorable a trade as somebody that has a degree but can't find a job.
Yeah, and it's hard work in a lot of situations, uncomfortable work. With the weather conditions, how they've been in Central Oregon and such, like knowing certain trades out here that operate through the seasons, it's crazy how they manage to get through. Who
doesn't want somebody that knows how to drive a snowplow?
Yeah, Yeah, you definitely have the job security there.
Absolutely.
Put yourself in a little bit of a discomfort, through to put you in a place of better, in the future, or for your family even. I mean, a lot of people, it's necessity, man, to keep improving their skills, because they take that home, they work on their property, work on the ranch or whatnot. A lot of people have been getting more into gardening, so knowing how to build and fabricate wood and metal structures is a very important skill these days.
It comes from self-reliance, living, in a place where you don't have a lot of skills around, a lot of support around you, a lot of assets, and figuring things out for yourself. Whether it's putting together a piece of furniture from IKEA, or whether it's fixing the network when it goes down, the Wi-Fi in your home. Those things. Those are great skills to have, and the more of those little tidbits you pick up along the way, the better off you are. My father was a geek. He came from a simple background. His father was actually a pastor in early life, and then was a kind of a low level farmer, and that was it came out of a agricultural culture. But my father was interested in radios and electronics, and he spent his life working in electrical engineering, and into his 90s, he was still tinkering around with computers and getting the latest software and getting the latest hardware and doing things, just because he had that passion and he followed it. Keep those passions and keep pursuing them. Just in setting up for this podcast this morning, Cameron, we had a few little glitches with devices and Bluetooth and whatnot, but we worked through them because we didn't give up.
Yeah, trust me, it's no easier on this end of the bargain. I again, like with you, I totally thought I injected details that I meant to inject in the situation earlier, but I am only human, and I have to admit when I make my mistakes, and this process is all about the trial and error. Podcasting is fun, but there's a lot of different subjects to cover and talk on. It's something like I mentioned earlier before recording, with politics especially. I grapple at how a healthy discussion looks, right? Because that's something in society. It's hard to know what a healthy discussion looks like, because there's a lot of situations where it's not a healthy discussion right now. And there's factors that make it so. A lot of that is stress. People are stressed financially, and it's a hard time. People are struggling with various elements like that they feel truly are out of their control. But trying to bring control back to a person's life, even if it's for yourself, is important. It's monumentally life-changing to at least get a sense of logic to the situation at hand.
Well, I think that when you're dealing with politics and with people's opinions, and I think it was Mike Rowe on one of his podcasts that said the absolute worst thing that you can say is, "I'm absolutely positive." Because as soon as you lock yourself into your point of view, you shut down the opportunity to hear someone else's point of view. And in my judgment, we have lost in this country the willingness to accept or listen to other points of view. And that takes a certain amount of humility, and it takes a certain amount of willingness to give some of your ground in order to gain perhaps something greater. And I know I'm personally saddened by the loss of civility and the loss of compromise in this country, because we are no longer developing what I would consider to be good public policy. We're entrenched in points of view that don't consider other points of view. And that's sad. That's very sad.
I would agree. Yeah, the sense of cohesion is lost in a lot of these situations. But that's also why I stress and really have tried to make it known for podcast guests that this is educational. At the root, I want this show to be educational for not just Americans, but people outside of America to understand, that most of our guests are, of course, going to be Americans. Just due to my situation being in the States, it's hard to find those international connections. But there are some international connections I want to make, because I want to discover what people feel, how they feel about society outside of their own too. There's always something to learn in those exchanges and through those networking connections. But the thing with podcasting that makes me excited, and it's not just podcasting, but I think the steps that we can take as a society to push towards better and truly come down to improving our communication among peers and having a sense of community, having that sense of structure and understanding why structure is there to begin with. We can make jokes and we can have fun and bicker and, spend time on social medias or whatnot. But at the end of the day, there's a sense of urgency to these situations. We have to decide, it's a daily struggle to find balance. I think you would agree with that. If you ever stop actively trying to create a healthy environment, then that environment magically disappears pretty quick. I
remember clearly an interview I saw on television with a young woman who was perhaps even a first-time voter. This was in the 2020 election. And she was astonished. I'm sorry, it was the 2016 election. She was astonished at the election of Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. And the comment that she made was, I thought everybody believed as I did. And that suggests to me that she's listening to only one side or one point of view or one set of media that's telling her what she wants to hear or what's comfortable for her, and believing that that's universal, and not paying enough attention to, in that case, 51% of the population that felt differently. And I think we're so closely, evenly divided in this country that we're well served to pay attention to what the other side is saying, and they likewise, because I don't see how we can survive as a society if we are not listening to what other people are saying.
Yeah. No, it's not sustainable. Our country's not sustainable where we're at. We have to change the way we approach things. And that comes with a lot of humility. It doesn't mean back off of our principles and our values, right, at the core. And I think that's the struggle, is differentiating the two. When is a battle really good to pick and choose to fight, rather than try to dictate in diplomatic means between the other, because there usually is a middle ground that people want to eventually find. I'd say the majority.
I would hope so, and the desire to dominate is not healthy. If you have a desire to cooperate and to achieve something that's mutually agreeable, the consensus idea, we're a lot better off. We don't study history much anymore, but if you go back a few years and you look at the era of Ronald Reagan and Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, very, very different political positions, very, very different philosophies of life. And they did battle on many, many things, but they also became good friends. And, they would tug and pull and argue and take, fight for their point of view. But then when the day was over, they'd go out and have a beer together. And that's what's missing. That's what's missing. The ability to keep things in perspective and not hold on to your views so tightly that you ignore or put down the other point of view.
Just based off of kind of you explaining that, I was thinking something through my head. It's almost like social media has created an extension, like an extreme version of isolation or segregation, because it's on the personal level, and that's almost worse because things are personalized. It feeds off of what you extend into it. So if you don't have the wherewithal to do your research, to fact check for things around you, it may very well be true that you're missing the facts. You're missing the truths of the situation, that at least the perspective to understand there's always multiple sides to the situation, especially with our society. I mean, I don't just hate liberals or conservatives just because they're a certain way. I accept that these are people in our country that probably have demands for a reason, and they probably feel a certain way for a reason. And we just have to be compassionate enough to understand they're our neighbors first and not our enemies first.
Well, first of all, you have to hope that they do have a reason and they aren't just going along with the crowd or because, they want their team to win. And I think the team or the sports mentality has sort of taken over, where we root for the people on our side and we jeer the people on the other side. And that's unfortunate. And Cameron, what I'm reminded of as you talk about social media and the culture that has developed around social media and the anonymity that allows, I'm struck by the contrast to the way I grew up, going back to that class of 27 boys and 10 girls, going back to that basic training with people from all over the world thrown together in the same barracks. There have been opportunities in the past where people of different points of view are brought together, either against their will or because of their will, but have learned how to work together. And maybe we need to look for more of those opportunities and spend less time on social media platforms that don't allow for that.
I think community workshops have been one thing in recent years. I've really grown to value the strength of that kind of resource.
Absolutely.
Because it brings those skills together. It gets a hands-on. It shows the value of trades. Maybe someone has a tradesman as their parent, and oh well, look, I know how to use a square and a ruler because my father's a carpenter, and they bring that up and bring that in, and all of a sudden you've interacted with your academics. You've interacted through that engagement to find out that you're unique in this way. Maybe you hold these values a little different from your father or your family member. In that case, you do things a little differently. Maybe you hold the tape measure this way, and you figure out the way that works best for you. But the fact that you made that engagement, it really that's the inspiration people need in a lot of cases to learn how to do it themselves.
Yeah, saw and hammer don't have a political opinion. they're just tools, and anybody can use them, regardless of their point of view. So you're absolutely right. Community volunteer efforts and opportunities to come together and work on something collaboratively. Great for breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, I had a little bit of community service assigned to me when I was in the Christian school. And, a lot of people were like, oh, 10 hours of community service. Oh, how am I going to get that done? And when I went, I just washed windows and swept businesses and did things that as a youth I could only do so much for these businesses, but the fact that I went out and looked at them first in my community because I valued them being a part of it, they really grew to appreciate that. That's part of the reason I have good business connects in Quincy, is because I spent time to get to know those business owners. And sometimes things don't always work out. You don't always agree with 100% of the people, especially in your hometown. I think most people will agree with that one, but it's worth the effort to try to engage in a positive way, at least positive in the sense that you're bringing them something too. You're not just always pulling from that business, pulling from your community. You're bringing something back to your community. That's important. If you really care about where you come from in the roots, like put a little effort into the things you appreciate in that community, and it doesn't always mean it's going to go a crazy place, but the people that are there will always appreciate that you took the time to think about them and to step out of your daily norm to apply something positive.
Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with showing a little kindness, a little generosity, a little thoughtfulness, helping the other person, maybe not expecting anything back. It's good to volunteer. It's good to help others, and you get your own rewards from that.
Yeah, having appreciation for what you're gaining, just through spending time. I mean, even if it's committing to a project. With some people, it's hard. I know I struggled in school with engagement. A lot of kids did. Curriculum can prove to be a little boring if you're not into math, you're not into history, like some other people. And having a degree of engagement there is tough. But when you're able to appreciate why those things are there and those things are there to improve upon you, that you can take that and take that any direction you want, put that into your career eventually. Like there's plenty of things from high school that I did that I still refer to with references and such. Maybe it's not all the time, but I can at least say, oh, this is similar to a project I did, or this is similar to engagements I had with faculty, and then learning about bureaucracy in school. And those are things that I've taken personally that help me to understand the importance of teaching this to other people. Because if they never took the time to talk to me or to acknowledge that I was even present, I would have never engaged the way I did. I, like a lot of people, tend to be a little antisocial, and it's hard to feel like you're properly engaged to the degree that people want you to engage, like a party. The party is a perfect example. You got a group of popular individuals, and you got the group that's a little less known. Maybe they're okay, maybe they're really cool, but you don't know them. So you're gonna risk that dynamic of your cool group, your stability for that. Well, you wouldn't know if someone never pulled you into the cool group what you potentially could be missing if you engaged with that. So it's always a whole dynamic, but that dynamic really never changes outside of high school. It comes with any group. you know, even a community group.
Well, I think it takes some sensitivity. It takes the ability to kind of look at your surroundings, assess what's going on, maybe pick out that one or two opportunities to extend a hand or to make a new friend. Put yourself out a little bit, and you might find that the rewards are great. My son is a perfect example. If he hadn't noticed that chemistry partner in his chem lab, he probably wouldn't be married now. But he found a new friend, and it was a good one. So I don't think you can sell too short the experiences that you make as you go along in life, and even in high school, if you're taking classes that are kind of boring and you're not sure you're getting anything out of it, you might be getting more out of it than you realize, and it becomes part of your nature, and it's part of your character. It's in there somewhere, and sometimes when you least expect it, it gets drawn out, and sometimes you say, "Where did that come from?" But you can draw on that when you need it and apply it. So
and I'd say there's a very universal lesson there too, especially for those who don't give themselves credit for it. Is if you got out of bed and you got yourself there, and you're present, like that's part of the struggle.
90% is just showing up.
Yep. Yeah, and employers will tell you that all the time. I've heard that a lot. You showed up, you came punctually, we'll probably hire you. Like it's a lot of it is just engagement. They want to see you commit some level of prioritization. And again, all this whole podcast is going back to priorities, and it really does come down to the core belief you carry about how important that is. And I think this is a great discussion so far, honestly. Very educational on the social level.
Yeah, I think, as I said before, you're born, you start to grow up, you don't have a clue. But there's influences coming at you from all directions. Some are positive, some are not. You react to all of them, and you take in the ones that are good, and hopefully learn from the ones that aren't. And step by step, little by little, you grow into the kind of person that you would hope to be, and you would hope others would want you to be.
With the active life of the outdoors coming up, people are looking to be out and about more. Sasquatch Farms CBD brings organically grown products in the Sierra Nevadas, from the soil to the people. Farmer John has worked on green projects on the farm since 2013. He looks forward to providing you with the highest quality soaps, salves, CBD tinctures, pre-rolls, along with some other fresh products. It takes a community in farming to survive, so any efforts made to support our farmers in the world helps to support our society as a whole. So remember, if you can't catch him out on the farmers market, catch him online at SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. That's SasquatchFarmsCBD.com. Thank you. Now back to the show.
Well, and speaking about hoping, and I know this is a weird transition, but bear with me here. I see you worked at U-Haul before. Am I mistaken?
Yes, you are.
Oh, so you U-Hauled yourself. Okay.
The reference to U-Haul comes after the reference to RAK, BAK, which is our two kids, Robin Kolb and Brian Kolb. And one of the tasks of a parent is to give kids roots and wings. And we tried to give our kids a sense of who they are, where they fit in, how much they're loved, give them some skills. As I said, it took our son a little while to learn that. But giving them a sense of confidence, and honestly, growing up in a small town is a wonderful opportunity to be not a small fish in a big pond, but a big fish in a small pond. And I've seen kids in this community, as well as the kids in the communities that we raised our kids, have an opportunity to engage with leadership of the town, of the community, to be known and to know them, and to have a sense of confidence and assurance about them that serve them well. So that's a good place to grow up and get yourself ready for life. But at some point, you got to kick them out of the nest. They got to take wing. They got to fly. And the U-Haul reference was the time in my life when I was renting U-Hauls to haul our kids to the next stage of their life. And in our daughter's case, it was all the way up to Spokane to go to school, and then it was to Seattle to start jobs and start a life there. In our son's case, it was Arizona and Modesto and Los Angeles and places like that. So our job was to facilitate them leaving and getting on their own. And while we supported them in that, our expectation was that they would become independent, functioning members of society, and that was our task, was to let them go. And I think they've accomplished all of that and more, and I'm tremendously proud of them.
Was that hard on you at first? Well, harder than you anticipated it being?
It was hard in the doing, because there's so much stuff to figure out, and so much in logistics, and so much in emotion, and and they're trying to figure themselves out, and sometimes the separation is tearing, it's ripping apart, and sometimes that causes some stress and emotion. But when it's done, you find that you have, two wholes instead of a bunch of halves. It's great to have people that you could now look to as friends and as people that are accomplishing their own things in life. And you share things together with them, but on a much different level. We're no longer parents, we're supporters, fans.
Yeah, and that's definitely the cycle of life. It's a hard discussion.
There's one other thing too. Cameron, and that's and if you do this right, and you get them on their own and independent, and you treat them well. You should, because they're the ones that are going to pick your convalescent hospital or your retirement home. So there is a cycle. There is a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. When I wanted to be a doctor, my dad was always telling me, I want to be your janitor. So he's like, bring me in, I'll be the janitor. I don't mind. I'll push a broom.
Yep. Well, I'm fortunate that our daughter became a nurse, so she can take care of us in our old age.
Hey, that's a good bargain. Yeah, it's a little more affordable than some other situations. Well, I wanted to get to our closing statements a little bit more. I think we've covered quite a bit, actually. We had a really good discussion there and quite a few fronts, and I really appreciate your genuine appreciation for being here. I genuinely appreciate you being here. Excuse me, I said that backwards. But this is honestly so fun, and I hope you've enjoyed the time so far.
Well, it's been an honor to talk with you, Cameron, and you know, if anything that I've said is useful and anything in my life is useful to others, then it's to your success and your credit for making the effort and putting it out there. So I congratulate you on your efforts.
Well, and that means a lot, John. It wouldn't be anything without a sense of community, right? The networking that's involved. I've spent months doing this now, and it's, you know, it's something that humbles me every episode to a degree where I'm always a little uncomfortable because it's always new, you know, but I'm appreciative of that uncomfortable feeling, because that allows for me to grow and spectate different things about myself that I can improve on, especially through my guests and what they bring. And what you've shared with me today is especially eye-opening. There's some information there I would have never considered today, otherwise, with you mentioning it. So I appreciate it. And yeah, what you said is wonderful. There's so much to derive from your knowledge. I hope you understand that there's always discussion to be had, you know, and even if it's just talking to the other percussionists at orchestra and you know, making yourself known in the community for that, you know, it's not a little thing if it has ripple effects, right?
That's right. You know, you've mentioned a couple of times the word humility, and I think I may have as well. I think that's often where it starts. You know, if you have a sense of yourself in the world that's not out of place, that you find yourself placed in the world in the proper relationship to everybody and everything else, you know, I think you're well served. If you have a more of an inflated opinion of yourself or of your position, that puts people off. And if you come in with, you know, certainly on an equal basis, or even in a humble way, you have the opportunity to gain from others. I heard it said recently that wisdom is the ability to be proficient with the complexities and challenges of life. And if you become proficient in the complexities of social interactions and, you know, skills, job skills, trade skills, whatever, and are proficient in the complexities of life, and going back to one of your first questions was about alcohol and the effects that it can have on you. That's one of the complexities of life. If you're proficient in understanding the effects of that, the consequences of that, the effects of the challenges that you face in life, if you're proficient in those things, then you become wise. And if you are not so inflated in your ego that you tend to think that that's all as a result of your efforts and not all of the people that have contributed in ways large and small to your growth and your attaining that wisdom. If you're able to be wise and humble, then I think you have a recipe for a good life. And for me, and we haven't really touched on that, but you know, I have a faith basis that tells me exactly where my place is in the universe, and that I'm not the smartest person. I'm not even the one that gets to call the shots. But it gives me a great sense of peace to know that that I can make mistakes and I can be forgiven for those mistakes, and I can move on with the proper sense of humility and the proper sense of wisdom.
Yeah, and that links up with my reference to Steve Jobs earlier, with knowing your you have to have faith in something to be able to look back on, and to get you forward to that point of looking back. And that comes with balance. There's a lot of different spiritual journeys out there. I mean, mine included. I've talked on the show various times, like, I used to be Christian for a long time. I grew up around it, and I completely understand why the connection's there. I feel there is a connection in this world. I've never felt different about that, but to the degree we function with that connection is always the part that I feel people get lost. It's hard to know exactly what the right choices are, and having a sense of good and bad are things that we've grown to know as humans for over generations past before our own. So there's always a healthy discussion to be had there, I feel. And this is really truly not meant to undermine your statements or anything. I just it's always interesting to me, looking kind of connecting my dots back because of my current beliefs and seeing where my mind goes with it. And it's not negative. It's never negative. I love hearing that people are inspired to live their lives. That's ultimately the goal I want to see. It's not, again, like the politics, picking a side. It's not the intent, but it is necessary to choose the avenue you want to put your efforts towards. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be on one certain side to do it. And that's kind of where my personal beliefs come into play with my spiritual journey, because I do, again, feel connected with people. It's the whole reason I wanted to do podcasting. But if you can't be honest with yourself on where you feel you need to do soul searching, then you can't really open yourself and expose yourself truly to what there is to learn from that journey, what there is offered from that journey. That's why these open discussions are very valuable to me, and I feel a lot of others out there, especially struggling with their walk as Christians or other spiritual journeys. Again, it's not to fault that in any way. It's just, you never know what a person's going through until you talk to them. And I think that's a good lesson that I've obtained through my years of Christian studies. Like brotherly love, having agape, as Martin Luther King Jr. Mentioned in his speech. Brotherly love and connections in that sense it's something I still value. I see you, and I see a fellow human that had the blessing of being here this long, to be able to talk with me and bless my life in turn, with things that I may not have considered. And hopefully, things I can take and improve this show with, improve my communication with people. So as long as much as that sounds conceited, it's genuinely from a good place. And one of thankfulness and gratitude.
Well, good for you, Cameron. I think that's a fair expression of, it sounds like, where you are on your journey. I'm probably a little bit further down the road than you, maybe a lot further down the road than you. I've had some of those same struggles and considerations, and I said once that the worst thing is to be absolutely certain. But one thing that I'm absolutely certain of is that I'm not in charge, that I don't have all the answers, and that as I look around this world and the complexities and diversities of this world, it's clear to me that this all didn't happen by accident, and so I got to tap into that, and I could have put myself in the proper place in that environment, and respond to it appropriately, and to the best of my ability, I try to do that, and that for me is the path that I've taken for virtually all of my life, and will continue until I'm no longer here. And after that, I know exactly where I will be.
And for that, like, I do commend you. You know, having faith is not easy. I mean, I spent a long time, again, debating, even with my own family, on Christian beliefs and debating.
Well, I wouldn't want to have the alternate. I mean, I wouldn't want to have no faith. You got to have faith in something. And
yeah.
if you have no faith and no hope, then it's pretty hopeless. So figure out what it is that you believe.
It really is a simple, not to undermine it again, but a simple concept. Like you have to, and I mean, it goes back to kind of the roots of nationality. Like, it's to have pride in your country, that can be a great thing, right? But it's to say, like, you can be very religious or very spiritual, but if you're extending out in a way that's not positive, in a way that's overbearing, then it becomes less about your message and the action, like the core element that should be a positive. And it kind of becomes distorted, you know, through being rushed, being forced. And that's I think where a lot of religion gets a bad rap. You know, there's a lot of forced engagements through history that, unfortunately, it's tainted a lot of how people view various beliefs. I mean, and that's not just for Christianity. That's for a lot of things. For every religion, I would, beg to say, and that's saying that I know every religion, which is impossible. I could never know that. None of us could. I mean, that's an individual level encounter we're talking about, And
well, I strive to be, and I would hope others would strive to be a mirror, not a spotlight, to reflect the beliefs and not try to spotlight on others their faults.
Yeah, uplifting. Bringing an uplifting nature is really where I hope to dwell, and that's why I've been working on my positivity. Because if I can't work on that within myself, I could never hope to achieve that through others. And again, one of the greatest examples I'm not going to lie, like Jesus Christ is a very, very great example of that. I mean, someone who walked out of the way to make good known to places that needed it, to people that needed it. Like, how awesome is that? Like, there's definitely a respect and a lesson to be had from that respect of others. And it's like, that's the cool parts of history for me, is that living element to it that still resides in every one of us, that we're people, and civilizations that are different, but similar to times past, and it's up to us to harbor the strength to improve and grow as people, maybe in different directions, but we can survive if we really open our eyes to each other's struggles.
Well, you mentioned Martin Luther King Jr., and there have been many writers over the years that have written volumes on the subject of good and evil, and positive and negative, and the sense that is within each one of us that struggles between those two, and you gotta emphasize the positive and suppress the negative. We all fall short, but if we are ready to admit that and learn from that and correct that, and allow others to do the same, then this world will be a better place. And the teachings of Jesus and Gandhi and Dr. King and all the others will have a positive impact. So I wish you well on your journey, Cameron.
Well, that means a lot, John. And as to you, truly, these kinds of discussions are the reason I'm honest about it. Because I could have bit my lip and tried to take a path that I didn't feel comfortable taking at the time, or I could have been honest and just lived in truth for myself. Why would I conceal something that I've spent most of my life actively trying to break down and trying to understand and appreciate? I don't intend to harm with my journey. It's just truly one of academic reasoning, and again, I'm thankful that I'm able to take that time, to have a situation where I'm given that time. A lot of people in life that, past feudal societies, like, people get invaded, and what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and pray, and maybe that's it. Like, how could I be ignorant that I've been given a chance to have time and to have reasoning to at least approach things in a reasonable way, in a honest way, like of connection. And again, like, what you're saying is true. I've seen a lot of people that really, really have had their lives changed from walking in, with Christ. And I don't think it's something people should dismiss because there's elements there that they may not fully agree with. I think having a discussion and opening yourself up to those discussions with neighbors, maybe, it's over Islam too. I've talked to people that believe and study the Quran, and they're great people, that they're individuals working hard, trying to provide for their families. They care about their families. They value their customers. Like, it's no different. It's different on, of course, personal level, but if the respect is mutual, it comes to that level. It doesn't have to get necessarily personal with everyone all the time. And then again, it comes back to the politics. We don't have to always dig and see why that person made that choice. We should just respect that person has that choice, and we don't have to necessarily fault them for it.
I think we've circled back to the beginning, where the point that I tried to make at the beginning was, you don't get to choose where you're born or with whom you're born. But once you're there, you start swimming, and it's either upstream or downstream. But hopefully you get to the end and you've done well. So.
No,
right
great.
Back where we started.
Great tie back. It is truly a great tie back. Well, and with that, I have two closing questions for you, sir. Okay. The first one would be, do you have any, and I have recorded the books that you recommended earlier, and I'll put those in links too, for viewers as well, if they'd like to check them out. But I wanted to ask if you had any other forms of media, books, podcasts, websites that you'd like to share with anyone that you find helpful in your journey of life.
Well, I think I mentioned before we started the podcast that I've enjoyed Mike Rowe and his the way I heard it, story behind the story. Great writer, takes a little tidbit of historical event and then teases that into a little known fact that that comes out, something that you didn't know you knew or knew about, but you didn't know the story behind it. So that's been enjoyable, and he's now doing a broadcast on TBN network where they take those stories and then tease them apart afterwards, and that's been enjoyable. So that's one I'd recommend.
No, that's a great recommendation. I'll make sure to put that down and post that in the description for viewers. I do also like Mike Rowe. He's a great individual. Talk about boots on the ground too. I mean, his dirty jobs was truly that. Yeah, that was quite the show to record, man. I really give him props for making it as long as he did.
Yeah,
truly. And respect all those hardworking men and women out there that are doing those jobs.
The foundation he started now that supports those trades and gives scholarships. I mean, that's a great thing he's doing.
Super cool. That would be great to have Mike on the show sometime. There's on our.
Well, he's Northern California. He lives in Northern California.
Yeah. No, he's home turf. We can reel him in. I'll have to invite you back for that one. But the last question I have for you is more personal. Do you have any closing statements for the audience?
To thine own self be true, but don't take yourself too seriously.
I love it. To the point.
And music is a spice of life.
That I would agree with, man. Yeah. Music's lifeblood. And for those who haven't known, because I didn't really make this clear, I'll put it in the intro too. But yeah, John's been a good friend of mine since orchestra, and we, as much as I haven't been able to talk with you as much as I really truly wish I could. That's something this show gives me a little more avenue with, to bring people in and have a coordinated discussion that we can get to know each other a little bit more. And honestly, I'm super thankful that we were able to make this happen and have you on. I think this has been great. You've been great company, and it's don't ever disapprove on your collection of life. Okay, you've had quite the life adventure, my friend, and I think it's very fascinating, and a lot of people will agree. And I can't thank you enough, John. Seriously.
Well, I've had rare opportunities, and I credit many people in my life that paved the way for me. You stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before, and you hope that you make way for the people like you, Cameron, that can play the drum set better than me. That they come after us. So.
Well, man, now you're getting personal. Oh, I need to brush up on my drum set. You don't want to know. It might be rough now. I had to give my drum set away when I moved, and that was a hard one, man. That was a really hard one. But I donated it to kids in the area.
There you go. So you're passing it on to.
Yep, starting a new generation of drummers. Hopefully, man. I really wish well. And your week to come, and this has honestly been a great episode today, and I appreciate, I'm sure John appreciates the viewers we have and who've made it this far potentially down the line. So I appreciate it, and this has been the World Networking Podcast, folks. Thanks again for being here today. we really enjoyed this one, and I love talking to John every time. He has such great stories to tell and a great attitude to tell them with, and I really appreciate having him on the show today. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and please don't forget to drop any feedback or send us an email if you want to outreach and possibly be on the show, or if you know anyone that you'd like to send our way. We really appreciate that kind of feedback and hope that you find a positive message out of today's episode. I know I did. Thanks again, John, and this has been the World Networking Podcast. Take care.